Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Sam Filler. I'm the Executive Director of the New York Wine and Grape Foundation, and I'm excited to present to you today Sustainably Farmed Wines of New York State with our host, Whitney Beeman. And we have an excellent panel for you today from some of our top winemakers from all over the state. And Whitney will introduce them to you. It's been quite a year, and this is, I believe, our fifth virtual tasting we've done this fall. And some of you may be familiar with our program, New York Drinks New York, which always culminated every March with a what was called the Grand Tasting in New York City. And just a little virus came through the city, so we were unable to host again in the Rainbow Room, but hopefully we'll be back there one day. And so we're doing these virtual tastings in lieu of the grand tasting. And we are fortunate to actually be able to now host a panel about sustainably produced wines in New York State. And this is actually supported in part with a grant from the California Sustainable Wine Growing Association. They received funding from their California Department of Ag to help promote sustainably produced wines in the US. And we were fortunate to be a partner on that grant. And actually, another thing that got canceled or readjusted because of COVID was there was going to be a national U.S. Wine Sustainably Conference held in Riverhead in May, and unfortunately, we had to postpone that as well. So, I guess please consider yourself fortunate to be able to participate in this tasting because we had planned to do this in New York City. I think it was like Monday, May 3rd, something like that at I think the Temple Wine Bar, one of Tom Colicchio's properties, where we were going to do a tasting with Oregon, Washington, and New York wines and California wines. So today you get to taste New York wines, and I know Whitney will get more into this, but we have a certification program for sustainably produced wines in Long Island. I think the program's been in existence almost a decade now. And it's based off of a program called Vine Balance, which was originally initiated in the Finger Lakes. And so we were hoping to announce at the summit that we were going to launch a statewide sustainability program. So we got a little delayed, but this is the first step in working towards that goal to have a statewide certification. So pleased to present this great panel to you. And just a little bit about Whitney. She is a sustainability specialist with a focus on cool climate, sustainable wine growing in New York State. Her decade of experience working in Long Island wine industry is bolstered by degrees in viticulture and enology from Cornell University and sustainability management from Columbia University. She serves as the program manager of Long Island Sustainable Wine Growing, where she manages grower relations, outreach, and education, including the Sustainable Wine Professional Course and the U.S. Sustainable Wine Growing Summit when that happens, hopefully in 2021. She is a wonderful person and also a Lead New York participant, which is Cornell's agricultural leadership program. And I'll turn it over to you now, Whitney. Enjoy.
Thank you, Sam. I'm very excited to be here today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us and coming together over sustainable wine growing. And I am thrilled to be in the virtual presence of so many rock star winemakers and sustainability leaders in the New York wine industry. So the goal of today's seminar is to bring some clarity to the meaning of sustainable wine growing, the benefits of sustainable wine growing, and why it's important. So I would like to kick us off with a little icebreaker, a question to the audience. If you could respond in the comments in just a few words, what is sustainability? Don't be shy. Okay, so I'm noticing some crickets. Thank you, Paul. So I'm gonna answer this question. So sustainability is this sort of catch-all term for the work that wine growers can do to conserve resources, reduce their environmental impact, and invest in the future of wine, in the future of their vineyards, in the future of their wine region, and in the future of this delicious fermented grape juice that we all enjoy. So in general, The issues of sustainable wine growing are all the same. There's protecting water quality and conserving water, improving soil health and remediating unhealthy soils, encouraging biodiversity and vineyard ecology, waste management, diverting from the landfills, recycling and composting, energy efficiency, reducing your carbon footprint, and of course, reaching out and engaging with your community to have a positive impact in terms of labor practices, sourcing, diversity, and inclusion. Now, what can differ around sustainability are the strategies that are used, because based on climate, location, vineyard size, and available resources, wineries may take different approaches to achieve the common goal of reducing their environmental impact. So we are going to hear today from a few wineries and vineyards across New York State about their sustainability strategies and their approach, whether that be organic, biodynamic, regenerative, biointensive, or certified sustainable, to improving their environmental impact and improving the quality of their wine. And we are going to kick this off with Dylan Buckley, the winemaker of Hermann J. Wiemer, as well as Standing Stone, as he tastes us through his Hermann J. Wiener Bio Riesling from the 2017 vintage. Dylan, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about the winery and vineyard, and of course, taste us on this fantastic wine.
There you are. Yes. Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Whitney, for taking us through the wines today and the discussion. First of all, can everyone hear me okay? Are we all good? Good?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I am the winemaker at Hermann Wiemer with Fred Merworth, and also at Standing Stone Vineyards. Fred is the owner of these two properties, and he and I collaborate really closely on all the wines that we make off both sides of the lake up here on Seneca Lake. Wiemer was founded by Hermann Wiemer in the late 1970s, and we have been making wine off of this site we're going to taste today since 1979, and looked at farming as a really fundamental part. I think, as everyone on this call will attest to the identity of the winery always being in lockstep with the farming. So the journey to tasting the wine we are today with regards to biodynamics started really in 2015. We began with my colleague who really is spearheading this project, a Frenchman who came here in 2014. His name is Thijs Verschroen, and he is a vineyard manager of the HAW farm where this wine is sourced from, and he started the process of doing the first biodynamic block in 2015, which he had trained at a few biodynamic producers back home, and was really interested in trying it out here. So we started with this young vineyard planted in 2009, with starting it in this growing season of 15 under biodynamics, and now in 2020 we're up to 33 acres of biodynamic viticulture across predominantly Riesling, and then one block of Chardonnay. So now the entire property here, where the winery and tasting room and the main facility is all biodynamically farmed, which has been again a gradual kind of transition with 5 acres and 15, 14 acres and 17, and then up to 33 now, with 2 very old plantings, 40-plus-year-old vineyards, and then 2 younger plantings that are about 11 years old. So yeah, it's we kind of do it all again, sort of by the biodynamic book, if you will, making all the teas and preparations here, and using the calendar to facilitate the different activities that we do in the different fields, and including up to picking on the right days, hopefully when we have the vines at their utmost kind of fruit bearing intensity. So
Dylan, can you tell us a little more about the biodynamic teas and how those benefit your overall sustainability strategy?
Sure. Yeah, the teas are a mixture of different herbs, plant preparations, chamomile, horsetail, lavender, yarrow-root, things like that. And we have a little biodynamic area out back, and we ferment all of them for however long taste decides, and then we use those as applications in the vineyard at different points. Some of them are to assist with fighting diseases. Some of them are to assist with growth. There's different ideas as to what each will do. But the main overall goal is to try and set up the plants to be able to fend for themselves and be really self-sufficient when it comes to dealing with issues that will arise, inevitably in all growing seasons, big or small. And we've been really pleased with what we've seen from the different blocks over the years now, and that's one of the reasons we continued to move more acreage under that program. And resulting, in the end, the resulting wines like this one here have been really inspiring and really pushing us to keep working at trying to figure out how to keep going.
Awesome. Could you tell us a little bit about this delicious Riesling that we're tasting today?
Yeah. It's 17 was a good vintage in the Finger Lakes. And so a great vintage, certainly not as wonderful as the one we just are all finishing up here, but really a healthy crop around the region, certainly in ours. And the biodynamic block, that vintage, we did 2 pickings. The first picking was on I think the 16th of October, it might say in your sheet. And then the second picking was about 10 days later. So then we fermented in a mixture of stainless steel and large format oak, and obviously indigenous yeast fermentations, and 1 filtration on them, and bottled in that summer of 2018. So what we've noticed from the resulting finished wines off of these biodynamic, certainly on the Rieslings, is a real pushing away of fruit characters, which I think has been a big hallmark of our sites and our wines, and more into these herbal and savory notes, which we've sort of started attributing. And I think Paul Brock, we've talked a lot about this at our different group meetings with his experimental blocks at his farm with thick skins, which has been a real interesting development. Seeing much tougher skins that therefore there's kind of this other flavor profile being pulled out of the fruit with the finished wines. And part of that then we're accentuating a little bit with use of wood, but yeah, and it's a very generally really fast fermenters, which is really interesting. By far our fastest fermenters in the winery now are these blocks.
So we do have a question from the audience, and I believe you touched on this answer a little bit in what you just said, but the question is plant self-sufficiency the ultimate goal for Wiemer, and what are the touchstone differences in the biodynamic wines?
Yeah, I think everyone who's farming grapes to a degree, obviously we're always going to be heavily involved as the humans trying to push these plants to do certain things. But yeah, I think all of us are hoping that we can figure out ways to make the plants need less inputs from us, whether that's chemically speaking or labor speaking or mentally speaking even. So yeah, I think that's certainly a big goal. I wouldn't say that's like our overarching goal with the project. I think part of the other piece of it is the owners of this property live here and they raise their families here, and so that's really, I think, another part of it that has driven this. They live right here on the property and each are raising children here, so how the vines are farmed is certainly going to have a little bit more importance to them. But yeah, I think we're really happy with how the projects have been progressing, and you know, coming in 2020, we were hoping to be certified with Demeter, but like everything, COVID, you know, even biodynamic certifications can't go on. So we'll go back to that for next year with them. But yeah, we'll be producing, you know, now coming into these next vintages, 4 or 5 different wines, from sparklings and still wines off these sites. So
Excellent. So now we will switch over to Roman Roth, the winemaker of Wiemer Estate. Roman, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and Wiemer and this wine, the Grapes of Roth Dry Riesling.
Sure. Well, great to be with you on Zoom here or virtually. Wiemer Estate is in the Hamptons on the South Fork of Long Island, and it's a beautiful area to grow grapes. Our climate, our sun. We have great, mild winters, so we don't have to worry about winter damage. We have, late frost, late bud break, so we don't have to worry about spring frosts. We have a very moderated summer with our ocean influence, so we have a nice, elegant ripening curve, and everybody since Corona knows what a curve means now. So we don't have a log phase where all of a sudden we get 15 volume percent. We have this slow and steady ripening curve, and I think that's what gives our wines the finesse and the elegance and the esprit, and especially for Riesling and for white wines or rosé or even for reds. I think that's sets us very apart from hotter climates, certainly. And of course, we're the last area in New York State to get a frost, so we can. In some years it's changing. Climate change certainly affects things now and changes things how they used to be. But we certainly get very long hang times, and I think that's another important part which makes it nice to grow grapes here on Long Island. Sustainability is something that we practiced for many years. It was a fairly easy step to adopt the final rule book that we put together on Long Island. Certainly, I mean, the recyclable sprayer is one of these things that I think that's one of the main things I think that sets wineries apart from regular air sprayers that just spray everywhere, versus the recyclable tunnel sprayers where you funnel back and collect a lot of the spray materials at certain times of the year, up to 50%. Like when we used to try that machine the first time, we would make a solution to spray 2 acres, and we actually sprayed 4 acres with it, because the tunnel, in the leaves, when you have a smaller canopy, really recycles a lot. So that's many different practices. We are very hands-on. We have Richie Pisacano, our vineyard manager, and I think there's a huge commitment to hand labor. And if you don't apply, we pick, for example, all our fruit by hand, or all our high-end. There's some rosé that we pick with machines, but the Riesling today, many of our white horse, our reserve wines, most of 60%, 60% of our wines get picked by hand. And you can only do that if you also go through the whole year with a focus by hand, with a team, where you manage a team, where your staff and your manager can manage a team and have a great relationship with the staff, so that the staff then brings their relatives and brings their friends to the harvest when you finally need 30, 40 people to pick, or 50. So the way we leaf remove very early, right right upon after flowering, and we even starting sometimes now to do leaf removing before flowering, helps us to keep really disease pressure much lower. And by doing all these extra early work, there's just a nice side benefit. We lower pyrazine, so we don't get those green grassier flavors. So that's a benefit. There's other benefits that because we have such nice leaf removing, again, you have much better. When you do spray, you get 100% coverage. Airflow, the minute the sun comes up, it dries the grapes. As a result, you get also riper seeds because the grapes are exposed. Then there's dew, it dries quicker because of our breeze, and that's one of the blessings of Long Island, that we have our sea breeze. So the dew dries a little quicker, or when there's moisture. And again, great canopy management, and that is all done by hand at Will First State. And I think that's the key. And once you have all that done, you can take a punch when you do get a hurricane like a remnant that we get. Luckily, we haven't had any direct hits since 1991 was the last direct hit on Long Island, and since then we get the remnants. And if you have these wonderful healthy canopies and open canopies and lower disease pressure, you can take a punch basically, and you can go through it and then manage it and still get a long hang time. So that's one of the main things. The other thing is I think we've gotten much more tolerant in the past. In the 80s, whatever, you got some red mites disease pressure somewhere in the vineyard, and the vineyard manager would run out and spray the entire 55 acres. Now, we really try not to spray insecticides anymore, and we do from certain years when there's more. It has to do with a bit of the pressure, the balance of the vines. But now we would spray 1.5 acres to treat, let's say, the Japanese beetles or red mites, and not spray 40 acres or 20 acres. So we really target a tiny spot. And so there's been sections where we haven't sprayed for 6 years, for example, insecticide. So those are commitments that we do. Healthier vines, it forms a balance. We form that balance. It's with green zones, with hedgerows. We have a horse farm with big paddocks. And somehow it builds a more natural and more balanced environment where you all of a sudden you don't have these wildfires of a disease pressure or wildfire of a insecticide outbreak, an insect outbreak. So those are the things I think we got more tolerant. Try to have obviously everywhere we have clover, grass. We have in between the rows we keep our green zones as well, and don't just do a monoculture of grapes growing and nothing else. And over the years, we've managed this balance, and I think that has helped a lot. Our whole helped us to become sustainable, to be sustainable, and make better wines. On that note, I guess I'll switch to the Riesling now. This is the 2019. It was a great vintage, fantastic, one of the dream vintages on Long Island. Couldn't be any nicer. This year we came close to almost beat it. We may have beaten it this year. There were a little bit of couple last for the whites certainly, I think, but for the reds we had a couple of little drizzly day, which we have a great vintage in the bag, but it almost became that 1945 dream vintage that you dream of when you think of Bordeaux or something. Anyway, back to Riesling. Not too many people know there's some fantastic Rieslings grown on Long Island. We are on the same latitude as Madrid and Naples, so the sun influence is fantastic. And we get lovely ripe skin characters, golden grapes basically as a result. I like to keep these wines. I don't find this wine. I like to keep all the tannins. I always compare it with a pear. The best part of a pear is the skin. Otherwise, it's a flabby, boring fruit. And it's that little bitterness that makes the pear delicious. And the same is with good wine. I think you want the skin characters. You want a bit of a balance of that bitterness and the fruit. Again, it's 12.1 volume percent. So it's certainly a very moderate alcohol wine, low alcohol. You don't hardly find that in hot climates. You find that in Europe, maybe the low alcohol Rieslings, but not so easy in the hot climates. So it sets our styles apart, our Long Island wines. There's this food friendliness. And then there's a seamlessness. I like a lot of lees contact. I work extremely clean, again, hand picking. If there's one rotten berry, we flick it out. We're fanatic how clean we pick. And we are even more fanatic how well I settle the juice. It gets settled for 48 hours. It's just the purest, cleanest juice. Again, I've worked in a number of wineries all over the world, but we're crazy how clean we work with our juice. And once you have this clean juice and you start the fermentation, now I can let the wine sit for 5 months on the lees. I can let it sit for 2 months on the whole lees. I don't have to rack it off because it's not going stinky. It's not going reductive. It's not, it's just a lovely, nice balance of this reduced, well, it just ages beautifully without fighting what you're trying to achieve, basically. You don't, you either have to force oxygen into, or you have to rack it off the lees, or you have to stir like crazy. You can let it be. And I think that's where you get this seamless texture in this Riesling. There's fruit, there's balance. It's just this the lovely creamy thread of this long lees contact that's on this Riesling. So I'm very proud of this wine. Fruit driven, clean, balanced, elegant. It ages extremely well. Our 2009 is drinking beautifully now. So that's 11 years. It's the first year I made my grapes of Roth Riesling. It's the picture of my mother, by the way, on the label. So I'm officially a mother's boy. But anyway, that's it, I guess, about the wine.
That's great, Roman. I have a quick question for you. Are there any styles of wine that you see climate change potential for in New York? Whether those be styles of wine that are great every vintage, or styles of wine that you're seeing, increasing hit after hit in the most recent vintages?
Well, certainly, I think in the last 20 years, we raised that the average temperature has got up 1.9 degrees Fahrenheit on our record keeping. So that doesn't sound like a lot, but it certainly has an impact. And we're picking now 2 weeks earlier than we used to pick 20 years ago. So style-wise, certainly rosé is a safe bet. You can pick. You don't have to have 23 bricks to make a great rosé. You can pick it at 19.5 bricks and make a beautiful, elegant rosé. So for us, that has been a big tool. And because we make a lot of rosé, so that has allowed us to spend more money on our red wines and do more hand labor and risk more blocks. And well, if one block doesn't look perfect, we pick it early for rosé. And as a result, the other 2 blocks will go all the way and we risk it and we make our big reds and our classic, Merlot, Cab Franc, and even now Cab Sauvignon. In the last couple of years, have gotten really, really nice results with Cab Sauvignon. So it's great for our blends that we make, like the Fatalis Fatum. And so I think that's where the climate change has helped certainly ripen these more difficult varieties, certainly more often, not just twice in 10 years, but now we're ripening them 6 times in 10 years, and 2 times is really good and 2 times is a little fresh, and well, we pick it for rosé then. We don't have to make these wines. So I think we use this the key is to be honest and truthful. Just because it worked 5 years in a row, well, this year it's not working or something, then well, pick it early and make rosé with it, and don't molest it and try to force it into something else that it shouldn't be.
Mm-hmm. And we do have a question from the audience. If you could just clarify about the temperature increase that you mentioned.
In the last 20 years, we've gotten 1.9 degrees Fahrenheit hotter, warmer. So then we were 20. That's sort of our average curve. The average increase has been 1.9 degrees Fahrenheit for our record keeping. Doesn't sound like much, but it certainly. I think the main thing is that the storms have gotten severer. If there is a storm, you get more rain than it used to get or something. I think that's the tougher impact now that we see more and more. And we never had to worry about spring frost or about winter damage, and there could be changes in tornadoes. We never had tornadoes. Now in Long Island had tornadoes, and in Connecticut some people died from a tornado. So there's certainly something that could happen, and all of a sudden you have a tornado in your vineyard.
Thank you, Roman. And now we will jump over to Richelson Harvick, the winemaker of Bedell Cellars.
Thank you, Whitney. I also wanted to thank the Wine and Grape Foundation, Sam and Jen, for putting this together. And giving us a chance to talk about sustainability and our wines. So thank you very much for putting this together. Bedell was founded in 1980 by Captain Susan Bedell. So we've been around a little while. It's a 75-acre farm. The property was sold in 2000 to Michael Lynn and his family, and has been owned by the Lynn family ever since. We're talking about sustainability today, and I think that it's important to also talk about not just the environmental and eco-friendly aspects of it, but the part that makes sustainability so unique in terms of its comparison to some other certification programs is the fact that it takes a social role in paying attention to the people that are working for our companies. So that along with the economic aspects are all something about sustainability that we shouldn't forget, that is all wrapped up. Does what we're doing make sense for the business? Will it actually result in giving us a better product and making the business more successful? Are the practices that we're doing safe for our workers? That has to be taken into account. We need to also take care of the people as well as we're taking care of the vines. So we try to do those things, giving our workers clear job descriptions, clear breaks, making sure they have days off, making sure that they have access to health care when necessary, and so forth. So all of that is wrapped up in sustainability that we've put together in the program for Long Island Sustainable Wine Growing. I think the most important parts of what we're doing outside in the vineyard right now have to do around the practices that we are using to protect our groundwater. And for LASW, that was an important factor when we went into looking at the program and looking at vine balance and seeing how we could codify some of the things that we've been doing to make sure our groundwater is protected. The biggest issue that we have on Long Island, Eastern Long Island especially, is nitrogen leaching. Mostly because the majority of Suffolk County, especially Eastern Suffolk County, is not on a sewer system. So most of the effluent from people's homes and businesses are going into the ground. This is something that we hope to be able to change going forward. But nitrogen is something we're all concerned about. That's why LASW has a limit on the amount of nitrogen that we can put down to pass certification. We're also concerned about the types of materials that are being used. We've tried to limit certain fungicides, for example, that have a legacy history in groundwater testing, things that have shown up over time. Some of them used by vineyards, some of them used by farmers 50 years ago. And so it's a complex system, and I think we really, you know, it's, as we like to say, it's not an end game that we get to the point where we say, yay, we're sustainable, we win. It's actually just an ongoing pathway. It's an ongoing strategy that we continue to follow. And one of the things that I really like about the sustainable philosophy is that it is embedded in scientific critical thinking. And it's constantly has the ability to constantly change in response to what we are finding out. We are nowhere near having all the answers right now. I think every generation believes that they do, no matter what time that we're talking about. But I'm sure in 100 years from now, we're going to know a lot more. People will know a lot more about what we're doing than we do now. So
Rich,
for Bedell,
can I jump in with a question from the audience?
Yeah.
So the question is, how do you deal with the challenge of getting other non-grape farmers on board? And I will add to that, do you feel that the wine industry has a leadership role in promoting sustainable agriculture?
Non-grape growers? I guess I'm not sure of the question.
Do you So Long Island has a lot of farmers.
Right.
And different types of food crops are grown, and also, other types of crops, sod included. And, how does the wine industry cooperate with those other types of farmers, to get on board in terms of sustainable practices?
Well, yeah, Suffolk County, where we're located, has for years been one of the largest revenue generating agricultural counties in New York. It's super important. I think we've lost that standing due to Chobani in your neck of the woods, Whitney. But it's huge. And there has been conversations with Farm Bureau, with other farmers about the type of program that the wine industry has put in place. So far, I don't know if anything has been, officially put together, but yeah, I mean, we share information whenever possible. But to be honest, we're sharing, I think, more and more information with other grape growing regions. In particular, I've just been working with a gentleman out in British Columbia who's setting up a program out in BC, and have provided him lots of information and helping them along, trying to get their program off the ground. So there's a lot of free transfer of information, and we benefit from that as well. When we started out in 2012, we had Chris Serra from Live. We had some other people come in, Cliff Olmart from Lodi, Matt Hoffman from Lodi. These folks helped us out, helped us to develop the strategies, the framework, tell us some of the risks and some of the hurdles that we had to overcome and would be facing in putting our program together. So I think it's important to kind of pay it forward to other people and other organizations that are trying to do the same thing.
The biggest challenge, I think, are the residents and all these huge lawns that are on the East End. It becomes more and more residential, and people throw their 1, 2, 3 Scott herbicides, everything gets thrown out there. And it's pretty bad when you look at percentage-wise how much is farmland and how much is beautiful green lawns without a single weed in it. But that's a whole nother story. That's the challenge.
Yeah, that's an issue too. But honestly, Roman, the bigger issue is home septic systems and what they're releasing into the surrounding waters. So the surrounding waterways are really important. That's what makes us the region that we are. We have the North Fork has water on 3 sides of it. The Long Island Sound to the north, Peconic Bay to the south, and we kind of are right touching the Atlantic Ocean. So our maritime climate is really allowing us to do this. That, along with the glacial outwash soils that we have that are very, very well drained, that we can withstand late season rains better than many other regions. And within hours, or really right away after a heavy rain, we can get back into the field and that ground is dry. So we can navigate this very, very well. Talking about Cabernet Franc, Bedell has 14 acres. It's fast becoming our largest red wine production. And I think that for New York, Cabernet Franc, I think, is also fast becoming the signature red wine for the entire state. It does well in every region in New York. It has a great affinity for the different climates and microclimates of New York. On the North Fork, it has shown itself to be a super good fit. I cannot remember the last time that I had to do any manipulation to Cabernet Franc, whether it was chaptalization or acidification. So these wines pretty much make themselves as far as I'm concerned. And as Roman had pointed out, we're making these red wines that are moderate in alcohol and that they're way more refreshing and much less intoxicating than red wines, for example, from the West Coast. It's really difficult, I think, for the West Coast now to make red wines with a lot of finesse and with elegance. We can do it really, really well. It's actually what we do best, I think. So the 2017, which we're tasting here, which was a really nice vintage for Cabernet Franc. This wine was picked at 23 bricks. Franc tends to be a real sugar factory. It's never a problem getting it to get to full maturity. I typically, we'll pick everything by hand at Bedell. It's 100% hand-picked and sorted as well. And these wines will go into stainless steel for fermentation. We'll do a traditional pump over style of fermentation where we actually going into a seed cart to catch some seeds and then pumping over the juice, depending on the temperature of that must, once a day at the beginning to 2 or 3 times a day towards the height of fermentation. I also do a delistage on most of my reds where we're transferring all of the juice out of the tank into an empty tank. And as we get toward the end of the tank that we're trying to do delistage on, we can remove a tremendous quantity of seeds and they're taken out of the tank. And we can then do a lot longer maceration without extracting too much seed tannin and adding some negative phenolics. And we did that with 2017 as well. So this is 100% Cabernet Franc. I typically will go into barrel before the end of the year. And the wine is pressed after anywhere from 15 to 20 day maceration times for Cab Franc. With 17, I did 18 days. Went to a stainless tank to settle and finish most of its ML. Sometimes it finishes quickly and sometimes it might take a little bit longer. I tend to like to get a completed ML or at least close to completion in tank before going into barrel. We also used vertical upright tanks. I have 1,600 gallon Seguin Moreau French oak vats, which are really ideal for Cabernet Franc. My experience with Franc is that it is really going to bloom during an aging process in neutral oak. Very, very little new oak for Cab Franc that I've used over the years, not much at all. I want that fruit flavor, that juicy kind of cherry, chocolatey component that will be produced over time to be allowed to express itself. And I don't want to see anything covered up with kind of a new oak component. So I've avoided new oak entirely on almost every Cab Franc I've made for many, many years. And I like the results a lot better.
Thank you, Rich. I really loved what you said about Cab Franc and how well it grows all across the state. And I wondered if there are any other grape varieties that you see potential for, especially with climate change in New York State, and if there are any new varieties that you're planting in your vineyard.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question because, and I'm torn about, I was thinking about this, how to answer this, because I've been asked this question by a few other people over the last couple of years. And part of me feels like it's a little premature to talk about changing over varieties because of climate change. I don't know if we know enough yet. I don't know if we have enough information. As Roman mentioned, we are getting warmer slightly. Yeah, this is my 39th vintage in this area. Did 10 on the South Fork as well. And looking back at the records, the growing degree days for Long Island have increased about 500 to 600 since the 1980s. So overall accumulation of heat has increased, but it's a complex system, as we all know. Some of the springs are getting very, very cold and we're getting a very slow start. And then toward the end of the year, we're going, you know, last year especially, we went into December before we had a frost. So they call it climate change for a reason. It's not global warming. We got rid of that term because it's not just about being warmer, it's about changing climate. And that could also mean more severe winters and severe low temperatures that could take us by surprise. So I don't think it's a green light, what we're seeing, to plant things that may be more tender, that we want to, you know, try to push the envelope with. I'm not sure that's the best approach, but I do think that it's going to make what we have in the ground that much more interesting and that much more exciting. We're going to be able to ripen Petit Verdot and things like maybe Carmenere and Cabernet Sauvignon. As Roman said, we only did that really well a couple of years out of 10, which I totally agree with. But it's also about rootstock combinations with clones that have changed. So it's hard to compare Cabernet Sauvignon Clone 1 from California on 3309 to the newer clones like 337 on Riparia, which is a 1 to 2 week difference in ripening times. So it's complicated. We're putting in actually some Cab Sauvignon because I do see the ability of that grape to ripen much more successfully, much more consistently on Riparia especially. And some of the other things that we're putting in the ground, Albarino has become a real winner. We've had an acre for a few years that we've been kind of playing with and seeing how it goes. We were waiting for some more cleaner material to become available, which it has. But Albarino, I think, is a really great fit. It's super hardy. It reminds me a lot of Riesling, which I think is part of its heritage, but it's kind of debatable. Mm-hmm. But we're putting 3.5 acres of that in. I have never seen a berry of rot on any Albarino in the vineyard at any time of the year. And we also don't see any bird damage. For some reason, the birds do not seem to like it.
Very cool.
Which both of those things are really exciting to me. We've also planted some Melon de Bourgogne, which I've always thought would be a great fit here because of its maritime history in the Loire. Mm-hmm. Auxerrois is in the ground. Verdejo as well is about 1.5 acres that we're playing with over at our Quarry Creek property. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I see, you know, right now for us, climate change has been more or less a net benefit in many respects because we are getting more time to ripen. We are ripening a bit earlier, but there's also other issues involved, like our gathered knowledge that we've had now for a 40-year region that we know more now than ever before. And so certain clones and certain rootstock combinations are also going to give an advantage to those growers versus what they used to grow years ago. Back then, you know, when you ordered a Chardonnay, you got one choice of Chardonnay. There weren't any clones. And now we know that there's a big difference between them. This Cabernet Franc, for example, is a clone 214 that's on Riparia. We have other Cabernet Franc plantings that are not the same clone rootstock combination that are completely different wines. So I think this continued gathering of knowledge that we've been able to do, along with knowing that we can probably ripen things a little bit better, is going to be leading to some exciting times in our region and some really great wines down the road.
Awesome. On that note, let's transition to Paul Brock, the winemaker of Silver Thread, for a red blend, the Blackbird red blend, that actually includes some Cabernet Sauvignon.
Are we doing Standing Stone first or me first, Whitney?
I believe it's Jen. It's the Silver Thread Vineyard 2018 Blackbird Red next.
Yep.
Great. Okay. Different than my agenda. That's fine. Welcome, everybody. I'm Paul Brock from Silver Thread Vineyard. I'm also the owner, co-owner, winemaker, vineyard manager here at Silver Thread. I'm also associate professor of viticulture and wine technology at Finger Lakes Community College. But of course, today I'm here for Silver Thread. We have 7 acres of vines here. Shannon and I bought Silver Thread in 2011. We took it over from Richard Fiegel, who had first started ripping catawba vines out and then planting vinifera vines here in the late 70s and early 80s. There's been vines on our site since the mid 1800s, back when it was gold seal. And kind of the northern reaches of where Gold Seal had vines planted here on the east coast of Seneca Lake, about halfway down. We grow all vinifera here, and with our sustainability, our regenerative agriculture approaches to vineyard management, we kind of call what we're doing as biointensive farming. I always go back to a time I had a few years ago when I was digging a drainage trench, and I was digging in the hedgerow of the vineyard, and that hedgerow has never been part of the vineyard. There's a stream going through it, and I remember looking at the soil, and it was black, and there's all this organic matter, and I was like, whoa. And then as I dug into the vineyard, you know, the soil was brown and there wasn't much organic matter, and it just totally looked different. And I had that realization that the soil that's in the vineyard used to look like the soil that is in the hedgerow. And, you know, our viticultural focus has been, you know, what do we do to regenerate that soil that we have in the vineyard after being farmed for 150 years and get it back. I mean, we'll never get it back to what the hedgerow looks like, but getting it more towards that direction. So really focusing on the soil here, you know, listened to a couple Long Island growers, and our soil here is very different. We don't have that sandy base. We have a hard shale base, anywhere from 12 inches to 4 feet below our topsoil. So very little soil in some of our vineyard. And it tends to be thick. We got clay, we got silt loam, we have all sorts of different seams that the glaciers left behind as they ripped through about 10,000 years ago. It's challenging to be growing grapes on a slope and dealing with all the variations in the soil. One of the things that we've been doing to conserve the soil as much as possible is planting cover crop over the whole vineyard. So when you look at our vines, we have fescue growing right up to the vines, and that's preserving the soil and trying to preserve and bring back a soil ecosystem that is full of microbial life. We've stopped spraying any kind of herbicide. We haven't sprayed herbicide in about 4 years, 5 years in parts of the vineyard. And, you know, things have changed quite dramatically. The soil has changed quite dramatically already. And, you know, this whole approach to farming, and I was taking note, one of the questions to Rich was, you know, how do we deal with cooperating with other farmers? Well, what I'm learning a lot about regenerative agriculture from other farmers who are in other, even crop farmers who are doing things totally out of the box from how our modern agricultural system works, and trying to learn from them and apply that knowledge to viticulture. And I agree with everybody who's spoken so far, is that we are just learning how to do all of this. We're just getting started and trying to get a real firm hold. I don't know if they'll know more in 100 years, or they'll just have more questions in 100 years about the right way to do this and dealing with whatever climate factors we have. Because the fact is, things are changing dramatically. We started biointensive farming back in 2017. So this 2018 vintage was our second real go around with it. That was after a transition from organic when we purchased Silver Thread. And I had a really hard time wrapping my head around organic at that point in time, because it relied so much on copper and heavy inputs of copper, and I didn't like that. So we transitioned away for a while, and now going back to this biointensive approach, it's really a different way of looking at using different materials. So it's not biodynamics, what Wiemer is doing. It's more of a form of organic that's relying on, you know, there are herbal preparations, there are plant extracts that are commercially available, there are fermentation products that are commercially available, both yeast and bacteria. There's live cultures that we use, and that's all to help with the disease fighting that we all have to deal with because we are in wet climates. And frankly, none of the vines we're growing are from here, and they have to deal with the diseases that were here originally. So it's a totally different approach than using the modern petrochemical materials in the vineyard. So starting with the soil, getting the microbes built back up and going all the way up, and using more environmentally friendly, more employee friendly materials to achieve the end goal of having a healthy vine and a healthy crop. And you know, I really liked, Roman, what you said is that when we have a healthier vine and a healthier crop, we're more able to prepare for those blips in the weather, those really challenging times. And I think that 2018, getting to this wine, was one of those opportunities we had to see the real results of how a biointensive approach, how a sustainable approach to the vineyard management can really prepare the vines well. We had a very localized system that affected both us and Wiemer and Standing Stone on August 14th of 2018. We've basically seen a drought up until that point. And on the night of the 13th into the 14th, between 1 a.m. and 6:30 a.m., we got 11 inches of rain here at Silver Thread. They were on a hill. It was quite devastating. There's a lot of vineyards around us that lost tremendous amounts of soil under their vines. And we didn't lose any soil because we had this cover crop underneath our vines holding everything in place. After the flood, it was a flood. We had the longest stretch of cloudy weather and humid weather and warm nighttime temperatures through October that we'd ever seen, that we have records of dating back to 1950. And that was very challenging because that was from basically veraison to the end of the season. And there was severe disease outbreaks all over the Finger Lakes, some of the Riesling vineyards locally and elsewhere were devastated. Now we have Riesling where in our biointensive block that are right next to these grapes that went into this Blackbird that we're going to taste in a minute. And that Riesling was perfectly clean for the entire season. I kept waiting for it just to totally crash. But you know, Dylan mentioned when you're farming in a biological system, the vines are doing more of the work. You're getting thicker skins, and those vines are able to be more resilient. The grapes are more resilient. And what we saw with the Riesling that year was remarkable, is that they didn't have any of the sour rot that we saw in other vineyards. And I could have let those grapes hang and made ice wine out of them. They were pristine. And that was the only thing I can relate that to is that biological management. Since 2018, we've expanded it to our entire farm because we were seeing such great success with that management technique. And so, you know, it's one of those things where we have a little group, we get together, we talk about it, and, you know, is there any one thing that is working? No, it's a system. We're doing a lot of different things, but it's all building up to make healthier vines, and it changes the wines dramatically. How does it change the vines or the wines? It's different flavors. We have our site here at Silver Thread. We tend to produce very minerally driven wines, and that the mineral aspect changes slightly and becomes more apparent under the biological management. So I'm really excited in the direction that we've been going in the past, well, I guess now 4 seasons into our 5th now. And we're, you know, hoping that more people will start seeing our successes. You know, here, Wiemer, other growers, I know Forge is using a little bit these techniques, and you know, pushing these into practices to see more people adopting them, to be more environmentally friendly and just more friendly in general to the land that we're taking care of right now while we're here. So Was the vineyard already organic? Yeah. So Richard Fiegel farmed Silver Thread